Hey there, and welcome back to Common Knowledge. It is time for us to take a look at another Magic the Gathering set. Can you believe another Magic the Gathering set came out? Well, it did because they keep putting them out. There's going to be 7 of them this year. That's too many. That is too many. But we're Common Knowledge. We only have to look at the commons, baby. We don't have to look at a giant list of cards. We only have to look at 86, which is still a lot of cards. But this is less than the Avatar set last time because we looked at like the Jumpstart ones. There weren't Commander decks, and I don't think the Commander decks would really matter anyway. But we had the Jumpstart ones for Avatar. We don't have that right now for Lorwyn Eclipsed. We just have these 86 commons to look through. I've seen a fair number of these, but there are a handful that I missed the preview stuff for, so some of these will be new to me as I run through these. I guess we're going to give them the 1 to 10 rating. I didn't necessarily care all that much that we did that during Avatar, and it does kind of keep any of these cards from being used in our rating 10 Pauper cards videos, since we'll do that here. But I suppose just if you like having that, we're gonna have a little bit of that. But I view this more as a bit of a buyer's guide, both for you and for me, because I need to see what cards from Lorwyn that I might want to pick up. At the time of this recording, it's about a week before pre-release. So I'm going to pre-release. I'm really excited. Lorwyn, the original Lorwyn, was my first pre-release. And this Lorwyn Eclipse is going to be, my most recent. It's been a long while, and I'm excited to get back to this plane, see some old friends, and maybe find a couple of commons that can go in my Pauper decks. The stuff I've seen so far, not hugely impactful for Pauper, but seems like it's going to be a really good limited set. So I am still excited for that. But who knows? Maybe some of these cards that I haven't seen yet will be awesome. I'm also going to change this just slightly from the last time I did it. I think the last time I did it alphabetically. This time I'm going to do it by color, because I think it's more fun to see the synergies of what some of these colors are trying to do. So we'll go through all the white cards, then all the blue cards, and Wooburg order, and see if that works. So let's get started. No further ado. Actually, wait a minute. Is this the right way to do this? No. Hang on. What if we did not images? We did full. Yeah, this might be better. Then we can scroll down and see each one like this. All right, let's get started. Appeal to Erdu is 3 and a white for an instant with Convoke. I'll do each one of these mechanics once and then skip them as we continue on seeing them. But Convoke says your creatures can help cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for 1 generic or 1 mana of that creature's color. 1 or 2 target creatures each get +2/+1 until the end of turn. A little combat trick, and it's okay. The problem with Convoke here in this sense is that to Convoke, you will have to tap the creatures, but if you're attacking and trying to use this on offense, you've already probably tapped the creatures, unless they have Vigilance, I suppose. But you've already tapped the creatures to attack, so are you missing out on the damage by not attacking with other creatures so you can use the combat trick, or are you... I don't love that. This seems really good on defense, though, where you can block and then tap down the creatures in response that you blocked with and use the instance. I think that's cool. I think it's going to be fun and limited, probably a little useful there, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be something that's all that great in Pauper. That being said, I think it's still, an okay card. And for our rating purposes, I guess I should explain the ratings as well. 5, I would say, is like just on the edge of Pauper playable. Anything between 5 and 10, I would say that probably can really see Pauper play. Anything below a 5 is not exactly varying degrees of bad, because I think anything in the 3.5 to 4.9 range is still a cool card that might have some niche use in a Pauper deck. But then pretty much anything under a 3, I would say, is you don't really need to you don't really need to think about this card anymore. And because we're looking at commons, a lot of stuff is in that area. But this I think I could give a 3-2. Three, solid 3. I think it's okay. I don't need to pick copies of this card up though. Gallant Foul Knight is a 3 and a white for a 3/4 Kithkin Knight. When this creature enters, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Kithkin creatures you control also gain first strike until end of turn. If this had flash, I think maybe we could start having a bit of a conversation with it. Kithkin is such a limited creature type. They really only show up in Lorwyn. I think maybe we have a couple other ones from Modern Horizons or something like that, but we don't have a whole lot of Kithkin to play with. Knights we do, but this is a Anthem effect for Kithkin. Although, I mean, the creatures, it's all creatures you control get the +1/+0, but it's only the Kithkin you get first strike. Yeah, I still would want this to have flash, so it could be a combat trick. Without that, I don't know. It's a 3/4 for 4 that does a little something when it comes into play. I think you're going to have a lot more luck in your white Pauper decks with something like Chocomog from Final Fantasy that gives you that bit of that +1/+0 Anthem for a few different turns. And this I just don't think quite does enough, and it's a little bit more expensive than Chocomog. Sure, Chocomog is a summon creature, so it'll die eventually because it's a saga, but I think it's just better than this card in pretty much every way. I would give this a 2.7, maybe. Anyway, doesn't really matter. Next up is Gold Meadow Nomad. For a single white mana, you get a 1/2 Kithkin Scout with and then if you pay another white mana, you can exile this card from your graveyard to create a 1/1 green and white Kithkin creature token. You can activate that only as a sorcery. This is fine. It's fine. It's it seems like it would be good for sacrifice decks, aristocrats kind of decks, but I think we already have plenty of those. You have your Doom Travelers and your Infestation Sages and your Nezumi Link Breakers. And black is the color that wants to have these more often, and 2 of the 3 of those that I just mentioned were black. I don't honestly think this does quite enough. For limited, I think this is a pretty cool 1-drop, and it's nice to have something back in the bank if you need to block a couple of big things over the course of the game as you're trying to find an answer. I think that's nice. I don't mind that at all. But when it comes to Pauper, I don't think this quite has it. It is nice that you get to choose when it comes back, whereas Infestation Sage and things like that, those as soon as they die, it's an activated trigger, or it's a triggered ability, not an activated ability. So those will come right back on the table. This gives you a chance. I mean, if your opponent has like Pestilence or something, so they just use Pestilence again to destroy all those creatures once they come back on the table. This, at least you have the option to wait until you take out that Pestilence or something, and then you can bring this from the graveyard, and that's okay. But it's just kind of whatever. I'll give it like a 2.5, but move on. Keep Out, I love the art on this one, is 1 and a white for an instant. You get to choose one. Either Keep Out deals 4 damage to target tapped creature, or you destroy target enchantment. Both of those are okay. The question here is this better than Destroy Evil, which does basically the same thing? It either destroys an enchantment or it destroys a creature with toughness power 4 or more. Those are very similar, but they're not exactly similar because you can use this on smaller creatures, but those smaller creatures have to be tapped. That's very possible in Lorwyn Eclipsed Limited because you have a lot of things being convoked potentially, or just things that don't have vigilance when they attack, and that can happen in Pauper as well. But it's okay. Honestly, it is pretty okay. I don't know. I still think you'd probably take your, knowing how prevalent something like Terror is, Tolarian Terror or Gurmag Angler, and those things all have 5 toughness. Those are pretty big threats that you see a lot in Pauper. I don't know that I would necessarily go with this, but it does take out a lot of threats. And the enchantments is nothing to sneeze at either. Even though Thraben Charm is kind of just right there and does even more than this. I don't mind it, though. I don't mind it. I think if you can find the very specific kind of deck that wants it and needs it as a sideboard piece, yeah, maybe. But white has so many options for this slot, and I don't think Keep Out is one of your best ones. Art-wise, maybe it is one of your best ones, though. Got something in my mouth. Don't like that. Let's go. I mean, a very playable piece of removal. I think this could be like a 3.9. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Let's keep on going to Liminal Hold, which is 3 and a white for an enchantment. When this enchantment enters, you exile up to 1 target non-land permanent an opponent controls until this enchantment leaves the battlefield, and you gain 2 life. So another Oblivion Ring style effect. This one a little bit more expensive, which I don't love, and you gain a couple life off the deal. I'll keep my Banishing Lights. I'll keep my my Oblivion Rings. Mystic Tether maybe is even a little bit better than this, and your Journeys to Nowhere, those only work on creatures, but those are 2 mana instead of 4. That's a big deal in Pauper. I don't particularly like this much at all. I'd give this a 2. Like, yes, it is removal. It removes a lot of things, but the 4 mana is too much, and the 2 life is too little for that extra point. That extra pip, I mean. Reluctant Downguard. Doing 2 and a white for a 4/4 Kithkin Soldier. This creature enters with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. When another creature you control enters while this creature has a -1/-1 counter on it, remove a -1/-1 counter on it. It's kind of okay. Yeah, it's vanilla. It's a vanilla 3/3, basically. But whenever you put down a creature, you get to make this thing a little bit bigger. 3 mana 4/4. After you lay down a couple other creatures in White Weenie, you're going to be laying those creatures down anyway. This isn't too bad. I think if this was 2 mana and maybe had some other kind of drawback, maybe this would be a little bit better, and I would consider it. But I think the 3 mana is still kind of a lot to ask for in the White Weenie decks that would probably play this. So I don't think this is really going to make your Pauper deck, but it's interesting. It's interesting. A nice 4/4 body is something that you don't normally get in a White Weenie deck. So this is a beefy little boy. But I'm not sure it's anything super crazy to write home about. And as a soldier, soldiers might make a difference for you. And soldiers can certainly put a lot of tokens and things on the table, so you can get this thing up to a 4/4 pretty quickly. But, nah. I think you can give this like a 2.7. Riverguard's Reflexes, 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2, gains first strike until the end of turn, and you untap it. Nice little combat trick for limited. Pretty much that's the only place it goes. I like that it gives it first strike as well. I don't think that's normally an ability that you see on these +2/+2 and untap a creature. I do like the little extra that you get from that. I'm surprised it didn't say, if it's a merfolk, you give it first strike, because it seems like they want to do a lot more typal stuff with Lorwyn, knowing that's what Lorwyn's all about. But this is nice. It's very, pardon the pun, it's very common. It's a common style of card that we see all the time. But this is a solid one. I would put maybe 1 or 2 in your limited deck. It's a nice way to surprise an opponent, especially by untapping a creature. Generally, your opponents are not expecting to have to deal with something like that. 2 mana is not a terrible cost for this, but doesn't really go in Pauper. I'd say it's a 1.9, maybe. Shore Lurker is 3 and a white for a 3/3 Merfolk Scout with flying. When this creature enters, you surveil 1, which means look at the top card of your library, and then you can put it into your graveyard if you want, or you can leave it on top. That's all it does. 3/3 flyer, surveils 1. It's not really a heck of a lot there. The cost is just a little high. Surveil 1 is not really impactful enough. It's nice, but it's not much. If you are going to try blink strategies or something like this is not the hottest blink target. Surveilling 1, okay. It's fine. It's fine. But for our purposes, it's something like a 1.6. It's pretty. I'd even go back down to like a 1.5. Not great. Not too good. Spiral into Solitude is 1 and a white for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and you can pay 1 and a white and blight 1. Sacrifice this aura and exile the enchanted creature. All right, Blight. This is our first time seeing Blight. Blight means to blight 1, you put a -1/-1 counter, or a -1/-1 counter. I should probably keep that consistent. We'll say -1/-1. A -1/-1 counter on a creature you control. You can also force your opponents to blight. There are some cards that will make your opponents blight, which means they have to put a -1/-1 counter on one of their creatures. We've seen a couple of these kinds of things show up. Avatar had one of these as well. A pacifism effect, which is a 2-mana aura that enchants a creature, and that enchanted creature can't attack or block. That's a pacifism. And we have lots of pacifism style effects. And you're seeing more now that find little ways of exiling the creature and getting a little bit more out of it. This lets you exile the creature for a relatively cheap cost, and two mana. You already have 2 mana. That's what you used on the spell, so hopefully you'd have it again. And blight 1, put a -1/-1. I said negative again. It's minus. I'm gonna say minus. I promise you, I'm gonna say minus. Putting a -1/-1 counter on one of your own creatures, not the hardest thing to do. The problem is I don't think pacifism effects generally are all that good. The Avatar one I think you had to pay a lot more mana for it, but you exile the creature and you make a 1/1 ally. And I like that one a little bit better than this. Just, hey, it's an extra body in the late game. Because in my opinion, if I played this card on an opponent's creature, I'm probably only really playing it on a creature that is, a token or is pure power and toughness stats and doesn't use an activated ability or have a crazy triggered ability or something like that on it. And I'm just trying to blank it from doing damage to me. And so exiling it is not really a big deal to me when I play this card because I know what I'm going to put it on. Because now this reads pay 4, blight 1, exile a creature. I guess that's okay, but it's also going to be at least part of it at sorcery speed when you have to play the enchantment on the creature in the first place. It's okay. It's okay. Being able to exile a creature for 4 mana and a -1/-1 counter on your own guy is maybe not the worst thing. And I don't know. I don't really like it. I don't like it for Pauper. I don't even really all that much like it for Limited. But it is an exile effect, which you don't get as many of those in Limited. Let's give it a 2.3. It is removal, but not removal I particularly like. Sun Dappled Celebrant is 4 and double white for a 5/6 Treefolk Cleric with Convoke and Vigilance. That's all it is, but that kind of is all it needs to be. I don't think you put this in your White Weenie deck, but White Weenie deck is a deck that goes real wide. You put a lot of creatures out, you tap, and then if the idea you can tap them all down and get a really cheap 5/6, maybe potentially even a free 5/6 with Vigilance on the board. That blocks your Tolarian Terrors and your Gurmag Anglers and at least trades with the Cryptic Serpents. Those are pretty relevant cards. I don't really mind this. I think it's a good stat line, and Convoke really helps it get out. It's in the right colors to make Convoke work for you quite well. I think you could give this a 4.4. Real solid little card. Maybe even in limited too. This is an even better card. A nice big thing that can come out at many different phases of the game. Mid game, where you're able to tap lots of stuff down for it. Late game, where you could basically just pay for it yourself or get a little bit of a discount on it and maybe play a second spell as well. The vigilance allows it to attack and then maybe convoke something later. I like a lot of what this little thing is doing. This is a cool card, even though it's a pretty French vanilla card, and you'd think, oh, that's not that big of a deal. But it's got the right stats, it's got the right ideas to it. The mechanics make this pretty solid. I don't think it's going to end up being a Pauper All Star or anything like that, but you'd be surprised at how quickly you could get this card down in a lot of Pauper decks. And 5/6, great body for that. Pretty good. 4.4, I like it. Timid Shield Bearer is adorable. It's 1 and a white for a 2/2 Kithkin Soldier, and you can pay 4 and a white to have creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. I don't hate this at all. A little grizzly bear with an extra ability that can become really relevant later in the game. A tiny bit of an anthem, and maybe even possible to use this anthem multiple times in a round. It takes a lot of mana, obviously, and 10 mana to do that twice, but it's a nice option. And that also is at instant speed, so having that for blockers is pretty cool. Being able to do that on offense is really nice. I like it. Not for Pauper. not exactly for Pauper, although I think you could maybe sneak a copy into a White Weenie deck and it wouldn't be the most embarrassing thing. But limited-wise, I think this is a really cool card, and I'm not embarrassed by it one bit. I would give this a 3.2. 3.2. I kind of dig it. Tributary Vaulter is 2 and a white for a 1/3 Merfolk Warrior with flying. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, another target Merfolk you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Another Merfolk is a little sad that it wouldn't be able to use it on itself, but that would probably be a little too easy just to have a 3-mana 3/3 flyer basically all the time. Being in white, you're not going to get nearly as many Merfolk. You'd have to be in Azorius, which in limited you don't mind because Merfolk are in Azorius in Lorwyn, so totally fine. But if you're a deck that is playing lots of different Merfolk, I don't think there are a ton of super relevant Merfolk in Pauper. So I don't know what this is really buffing. What card in your deck does this help with? Does this synergize with? Is 3 mana for a 1/3 flyer that can get this buff some of the time? Is that worth it? I don't know that it is. It's probably not, honestly. Although, imagine this. You play 4 copies of this in your deck. They can do it to each other. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. It's still probably not quite good enough. I'll give this a 2.4. I'll bump it up to like a 2.6, but it's still not all that useful. Last white card of this video of Lorwyn Eclipsed is Wonderbrine Preacher, 1 and a white for a 2/2 Merfolk Cleric. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, you gain 2 life. Yeah, I don't know. I seem to like that Kithkin quite a bit, and I seem to not like this one as much. But this one triggers a lot more often. It's a grizzly bear that gains you 2 life a turn. That's kind of okay, but I don't love it. I think this thing can die too easily. You'll gain the life maybe one time. Yeah, you can use it for convoke fodder, but that is definitely more of a Lorwyn Eclipse limited trick and less of a Pauper trick. There are ways to tap things down in Pauper too, tap down your own stuff, but not nearly as much as you see in Standard right now with the planets and things like that you're tapping down creatures, or vehicles that you're tapping down creatures to crew, or saddling stuff. Those mechanics don't show up nearly as much in Pauper. Not that they don't, but they don't show up nearly as much, and I don't think this is the best effect for it. 2 life, though, a turn is pretty good. Like, we use Campfire just for that ability, basically. But Campfire can go in any deck, and it's 1 mana to play, and it's an artifact, so you don't have to attack in. It's a little bit more keepable on your side of the table than a Grizzly Bear is. Yeah. I think you can give this a 2.5 and not worry about it too much. No white cards that I thought were all that necessary. You know what? Actually, I'll probably pick up a couple of copies of Sun Dappled Celebrant. I don't have a white weenie deck, but it seems like if I were to make one, or maybe make something like that later, I might grab a couple copies of that. Let's move on to the blue cards. We'll start with Aquatex Defenses. 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura with flash. Enchants a creature you control. When this aura enters, enchanted creature gains hexproof until end of turn, and enchanted creature gets +1/+2. Okay. I like little flash speed protection spells, especially when they're not just instants. This is pretty cool to get this on a creature at flash speed. So it's basically an instant, but you also get a holy strength out of it with the 1/2 stat bump. That's all right to me. That is quite all right to me. I think that'll be a really nice limited trick in pre-release, but it will be. I don't know where it goes necessarily in Pauper. If this was an equipment that when it comes into play, it attaches to a creature and does the exact same thing, and we kind of have that. We had something like that with Edge of Eternities, right? We had a blue equipment that would equip that flash speed equipped and gave hexproof for a turn, and we didn't really play that either. So I don't know how much play this will get, but I do think it's kind of nice. And if you are playing in a more Bogles, if you're playing in Bogles, you already have the hexproof. You don't really worry about this. But if you are playing something that is more enchantment based, and you need an enchantment that also can function as a protection spell, this is not the worst of them. Not too bad. I'd give it a 3.3. Blossom Bind is 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. When this aura enters, tap enchanted creature, and enchanted creature can't become untapped and can't have counters put on it. This one's a little bit interesting. I like the wording on this. It's different than these kinds of effects we've gotten. Usually we'll get the blue spell, an enchantment or an instant that will say, tap a creature, it can't untap on its opponent's next untap step, or it doesn't untap during its opponent's next untap step. That's the wording, usually the syntax. Or it'll say it doesn't untap, and that's all it says. And so you can use different effects that will untap the creature outside of the untap step. So you do have ways of getting around that, but this one just says, hey guys, this thing can't untap at all. If you try to sneak around it and make this thing, you have some ways of untapping a creature, this isn't going to work. You can't do that on this. I like that. And not being able to put counters on a creature is also kind of interesting, especially for Lorwyn Eclipsed Limited, knowing that people are going to try blighting their own creatures quite a bit to get extra effects. This just says, hey, this useless guy for you, this guy that can't attack or block because it's tapped down, instead of just being a pacifism style effect that says, well, it's just kind of a useless body out there that you can blight to your heart's content because what matters? This one goes, you can't even blight this guy. That's all right. That's all right for Lorwyn Limited. Not very good for Pauper. I think this is like a 1.3 for Pauper. It does show the difference, the ways that some of these cards can be utilized in different formats. I just don't really think this goes anywhere in Pauper. You're putting counters on a creature is not that big of a deal when you've already taken care of the creature from a removal sense. If you put a pacifism on a carrion feeder, I guess it's cool that the black deck can still keep putting the +1/+1 counters on it, and you wouldn't be able to do that with this. But black doesn't have great ways of getting rid of enchantment. I don't see the value in a Pauper deck where I could see it in Lorwyn Eclipsed Limited. It's okay, but I think 1.3 for the purposes of Pauper is about what I'm thinking. Glamour might. That's right. There is Glamours was part of Lorwyn or Morningtide. Getaway Glamour and stuff like that. Or that actually was Outlaws of Thunder Junction, but Glamour has been something we've seen before. Glamour Might is 2 and a white, or 2 and a blue, excuse me, for a 2/2 fairy rogue with flash and flying. And when this creature enters, you choose one. You either tap target creature or you untap target creature. This is okay. But it's not. This is not going in fairies. Too expensive for fairies. You have cards like Harrier Strix that comes down and does something similar to this, but for 1 mana. You have the Network Disruptor that does something similar to this for 1 mana. Sure, those don't have flash, but they also don't cost 3 mana. And this just costs too much to really be that impactful. Flash speed, Flying Fairy sounds like it's great, but then 3 mana just prices it right out of the deck that would really want that. And that's a really strong deck. I'm sure Wizards went, let's not make any fairies that are too good at common rarity. We don't want to upset that. Even though I don't think they view Pauper as much when they're designing like they do other sets, but I think they'd be lying if they said they didn't consider Pauper at all. And so I didn't really expect to see any amazing fairy cards at common. And this is more what I expect. Like, hey, this is a cool card. It does a lot of stuff on it, and priced right out of the the format that might want it, that might be excited about it. I mean, it'll be a cool card in Limited. Pauper, I really wouldn't even consider it though. But it's like a 2.5. It does cool stuff. Gravelgill Scoundrel. Some great names in here. I think we'll get to some even better names later. Gravelgill Scoundrel is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 Merfolk Rogue with Vigilance. When this creature attacks, you may tap another untapped creature you control. If you do, this creature can't be blocked this turn. Pretty cool. This thing attacks with other creatures really nicely. This thing works with Convoke relatively nicely, being able to untap stuff to tap it down again to pay for some of those costs. Being another unblockable creature is pretty nice. Sorry, I misread that. Forget everything I said. When this creature attacks, you may tap another untapped creature. Not untap. Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. Okay, that's a lot less good, right? So it doesn't play nicely with other creatures. I guess it plays well with itself. If you have multiple copies of it, you each can tap the other down, and now you get 2 unblockable 1/3s. But you also miss out on the usefulness of the Vigilance. It's okay. It actually goes really nicely with that flying one that gives another +2/+0 that we saw. I'm seeing fun little limited synergies, but not really Pauper ones. Yeah. I mean, if you have a creature, and you do in Pauper, you end up having a number of creatures that just kind of sit on the battlefield. They don't really do a heck of a lot. You don't want to swing them into an opponent because they'll just block and they'll just die. And this says, hey, this is at least something you can do with it. You can tap a creature down. You can make this unblockable. It can swing through. It's got Vigilance, so it'll stay up to block. 1/3 is not a terrible stat line for a creature that has Vigilance that can stay up and block. I don't mind it, but I don't think Pauper really has a place for it. You can give us like a 2.6. Kolrath Mystic is 2 and a blue for a 2/4 elemental wizard. When you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, this creature gets +2/+0 and gains Vigilance until end of turn. I don't love it, but 3 mana for a 2/4 isn't a terrible stat line. I don't mind that, especially when it has ways of becoming a 4/4, and then when it's saying you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, well, you've already cast this on 3, so you would imagine that your next turn you drop another land. Now you have 4. Then you play a 4-drop, and this thing becomes a 4/4. So there's value there, and especially in a pre-release where maybe you can play a little more top-end stuff, knowing that the format is generally slower. But yeah, I kind of don't mind it. And then it stays up on blocks because it's got vigilance, and now it's a 2/4 that blocks a good amount of stuff. I think it's a cool little card. Not for Pauper though. Not for Pauper really at all. It's too slow for Pauper, but well, it'll do some work for you in limited. Mark my words on that one. Let's give this like let's just give it a 2. Nothing too good. Runaway Together is a reprint. We've seen this one in lots of stuff, but this is a good card. Really good in Commander. But let's talk about it here. Runaway Together is 1 and a blue for an instant. Choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players. Return those creatures to their owner's hands. All right. Obviously, in 1v1 Magic, like Pauper, like Limited, you're bouncing an opponent's creature and one of your creatures. That can be good because you might have ETB effects with your creatures. That's fine. Or maybe it's a way of protecting one of your creatures from dying and keeping one of your opponent's creatures from. Maybe your opponent attacks with 2 creatures, you block with 2 creatures, you bounce the one of yours that blocked, and then you bounce the opponent's creature from the other fight against that other one that blocked. So now you blank them out twice with the damage. That's okay. That's okay. You can do some cool stuff with that. In Commander, this is obviously a much better card because 2 different players, neither of them has to be you. You can just take out 2 creatures, bounce them back to your opponent's hands, and then be able to swing in more freely. And that makes it a really cool card for that. Less cool for some of these. It's for like Limited and Pauper. We've seen this card before so many different times because it's a cool card. It's got some really neat ideas. It's already been in Foundation, or sorry, it's already been in Standard with Bloomburrow. It's in Standard basically forever with Foundations, and now it's in Standard again with Lorwyn Eclipsed. Whatever. But this will be fun and limited especially if you have like ETB effects on your creatures and do something with that. But in Pauper, we've never really seen this card do a heck of a lot, and I kind of expect that to continue. We just have other cards that are better. I'll give it a 3 because I think you can do some really fun things with it. But Silvergill Peddler is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 Merfolk Citizen. When this creature becomes tapped, you draw a card and then discard a card. Okay, a little looter. Like we just kind of have Merfolk Looter though, and it's cheaper. It's not a 2/3 though. So if you are going to attack with this, and you can probably get some solid attacks in with it before it gets blocked and killed, you get a little loot effect. And, it works with the Convoke stuff and all that stuff as well. Other ways of tapping down creatures, that's okay. But I think for this cost, a 2/3 for 3, you don't want to just tap it down for little values because this thing is cost you enough that it should really be doing more than get tapped down by something else. That's a job that your 1/1s should be doing. Like if you tap down a 1/1 to get an effect, okay, I don't mind that as much. But if I'm tapping down something I paid 3 mana for, and that's 2/3 in stats, I want it to do a little bit more than just get tapped once every turn and not be up for blocks and not really do a heck of a lot. That's more of a feel bad to me. I don't love that. What do we give something like that? It does have nice art though, for whatever that's worth. Let's give this a 2. Might be slightly better than a 2, but I think a 2 is fine here. Next page, we're going through 21 to 40 of these 86 cards, so we're about a quarter of the way through. Stratosorer is 4 and a blue for a 3/5 elemental with flying. When this creature enters, target creature gains flying until end of turn. It's got basic land cycling for 1 and a blue, so you can discard this card, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. I like this card a lot for Limited. Because we've seen and heard that air elementals win in pre-release. They're just good cards. and that's 5 mana for a 4/4. And this is 5 mana for a 3/5. So you're getting very similar stats with flying. The air elementals are 4/4s with flying. So this is a 3/5 with flying, very similar stats. But it gives you a little something extra. I like that it gives you a little something extra when it comes into play. It gives another creature flying, so maybe you can swing in unencumbered with a different creature. I don't mind that. And then what I really like, especially for limited, but maybe even in Pauper, not really, but maybe, is that basic land cycling here is potentially better. Okay. Okay. In limited, it's better than the cyclers from Lord of the Rings. Those were 1 mana with cyclers for specific land types, so island cycling or swamp cycling, those kinds of things. And this one costing a little bit more and also costing a color pip, which is not nothing. That's going to be somewhat of a big deal. But being able to go grab any basic land and put it into your hand and then be able to have another land drop, I think that's really nice for the early game, especially in Lorwyn Eclipsed, where you have a lot of factions that are in multiple colors, lots of tribes that are in multiple colors, and especially for elementals, which this card is. And in Lorwyn, there are lots of elementals in all different colors. So to have something that says you can grab whatever basic you need for your elementals deck, I think that makes 5-color elementals a much better possibility, a much more viable strategy in pre-release, while also giving you the ability to play a couple colors in your Merfolk deck. If you play Azorius Merfolk, you have something that can go grab you a plains when you need it, or if you wanted to splash another color in your Azorius Merfolk just to be able to play, some little red card, being able to go find your 1 mountain in your deck, in your pre-release deck with a card like this. Pretty cool. I dig this quite a bit for the limited environment. And I think we're going to find some other creatures that do similar things in different colors. I don't know if this is exactly a cycle. It might be. But even so, it's just a 3/5 body for 5 that flies. That's also pretty darn good, and it gives a little boost by giving something else flying for a turn. Pauper, again, not really, but limited. I'm pretty excited about this. I could see blue being a color to really look out for in limited if you have nice commons like this to mess around with. 3. I'll give it a 3. 3 for Pauper specifically. Summit Sentinel, 1 and a blue for a 1/3 elemental soldier. When this creature dies, you draw a card. I don't mind that. In Pauper, we have Outlaw Medic, which is from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. That is 1 and a white for a 1/3 dude, human rogue or whatever he is. Human cleric, human medic. I don't know, whatever. Outlaw medic is a 1/3, but he's and when he dies, you draw a card. So a very similar card, but that guy also has lifelink, which makes a big deal, and that's why it gets played in something like Caw Gates, because it's another thing that goes really nicely in a Gates deck. This does everything except the most important thing that it needs to do, which is have lifelink on it. So this will not be going in your Gates deck, which is pretty disappointing. I kind of wish this was another option for a Gates deck, but pretty cool for limited, at least, in that you are paying yourself back when an opponent tries to remove this guy. You get to draw a card when he dies. That's okay. You might want the card more than the guy at some point, so that's you really don't mind it dying then. A good blocker as well to block and then get you a little extra value on its way out, but I don't think it goes past limited. I'd give it a 1.7 in Pauper. Temporal Cleansing we have also seen before, this time in March of the Machine, so relatively recently, although it is not in Standard anymore from that, so now it's back in Standard with this. Temporal Cleansing is 3 and a blue for a sorcery with Convoke, and the owner of target non-land permanent puts it into their library second from the top or on the bottom. It's not terrible. I usually think these spells, which are almost exclusively in blue, are very overcosted. I find all of them to be extremely overcosted, and I guess part of that is you're really screwing up your opponent's tempo. If they do think the card is important enough that they need to keep it, that they want to get it back, putting it second from the top is a real tempo play. They've got to find ways of either drawing cards or waiting a couple of turns to get that thing back. That could be tough. Or if they, don't want to bother with it, then they put it on the bottom and you really don't have to worry about it ever again. That's cool. That's cool. But the coolest thing on here is the Convoke, because that turns a card that I think especially is generically too expensive. I'm going to turn this lamp on, by the way. You get a card type that I think is generally too expensive, and you have ways of really discounting it. Especially, Convoke can make this free at some points, and that's kind of cool. That is kind of cool. I think it'll be nice and limited. Hasn't done anything in Pauper before, and I don't think it'll do anything in Pauper now. Let's give it a 1.9. Unexpected Assistance is 3 and double blue for an instant with Convoke, and you draw 3 cards and then discard a card. With Convoke and instant speed, pretty good. This is pretty good. Nice little draw spell. Imagine that you're in a control-y kind of deck. It can't be a complete control deck because your control deck isn't playing too many creatures probably. But if you have a way of just stuffing the board with a bunch of nice blockers, like we've seen some of them already. If you have your 1/3 guy, you have your Merfolk with Vigilance that we saw on the previous page. You saw some other guys that just sit there and are kind of, I don't want to say menacing because that's another mechanic in Magic, but I don't want to say intimidating either because that's another mechanic in Magic. But they are there to make an opponent think twice, which is another card in Magic, about attacking you. So you generally just stall up the board. Your opponent knows that they can't really swing into this, so they just pass. And at the end of your turn, you tap all those creatures down, and then you get this effect. More or less for free, but maybe really, really cheaply. Drawing 3 cards and discarding a card, hell yeah. Especially when you can do that for 1 mana, 2 mana, free, maybe. Awesome. This will be another really good limited card. And maybe could be something to play in Pauper. The problem is I don't think blue, for the most popular Pauper decks that are out there, blue isn't really the color for lots of creatures. I don't think there's a lot of creatures in most of the blue heavy decks. Maybe fairies, maybe, but that's I think generally with fairies you want to be attacking with all those fairies basically all the time, so you can flip them into ninjas. So you're not going to have a heck of a lot of untapped creatures for that either. I could see maybe trying it in fairies, but I think it'll be really nice in pre-release where you can play it not exactly as a splash because it is double pip, but you at least will have some decks that probably play a lot more creatures. You generally have a lot more creatures in your decks in pre-release, knowing that you want to get some value on the board that can accrue more value or more damage to your opponent, which is also value in a way over time. So you generally play more creatures in pre-release, and I think this card shines more in those cases. Still, a really cool card. I think I could give this all the way up to like a 4.6 for Pauper. I think there's a kind of deck you could build that could make something like this work, and the potential to draw 3, discard 1 for free is very alluring. That is a very cool idea. Wonderwine Distractor is 3 and a blue for a 4/3 Merfolk Wizard. When this creature becomes tapped, target creature an opponent controls gets -3, -0 until end of turn. That's okay. It'll be. I feel like this is going to be a broken record thing. That'll be also a really nice effect in limited. just blanking opponents, letting this thing and maybe letting other creatures of yours swing in very unimpeded, knowing that you're taking out, or you're not taking out, but you're hindering your opponent's biggest threat to something that won't even be able to block this thing effectively. Certainly not trade with it, but maybe not even put them in a position where they have to start chumping with stuff instead of being able to trade or do better. That is nice. That is nice. Pauper, not really. Too expensive. 4 mana for this card. Doesn't do anything when it comes into play. Although I suppose if you have ways of tapping the creature down at instant speed, maybe it could do something on the turn it comes into play. But generally, this is a pretty vanilla card that takes a little too long to get up and running in a Pauper deck. It's like a 1.5 in Pauper, but this thing probably is also really solid and limited. I'm just comparing what I've seen from white common cards, and blue common cards so far. I'm liking blue quite a bit. I think there's a lot of blue cards here that I'm kind of targeting from a limited perspective, but still, nothing on my notebook. It's a clean sheet of paper right now. I've not seen a single Pauper pickup yet, except maybe that Tree Folk. Maybe that Tree Folk. Wild Unraveling is our last blue common. It is double blue for an instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you can either blight 2 or pay 1. We've talked about blighting before. And it's a counter spell. You counter target spell. This is... I don't know, man. I don't know. This... I might have to pick up some copies of this. There are a lot of halfway decent blue counter spells in Pauper. You know, you got your mana leaks and your force spikes and your counter spell, just counter spells in the format. You have lots of good counter spells at 2 mana or lower. Spell Pierce, that's another one. You don't get a whole lot that just say counterspell. And this one is, in a lot of ways, just counterspell. Having 8 copies of counterspell in your deck is really powerful. But also, having 4 copies of counterspell and 4 cancels is not so good in your Pauper deck. And in a lot of ways, this is also just a cancel. Like we said, blue is not the deck with a lot of creatures in it. Generally not a color that is playing that. And having to blight to put 2 -1/-1 counters on a creature you control is not amazing. But I don't think that's a bad deal to stop an opponent's game plan. If this basically said sacrifice a creature and counter target spell, which it is, I think it's going to be that quite a bit of the time, because the blue creatures that you have are not going to be all that powerful. But if you had to, in mono blue terror, if you had to sacrifice your Delver of Secrets to counter an opponent's really big spell, I think you'd do that trade. I think you'd do that trade all day. And if you have the mana, if it's later in the game and you have the mana for it, you just play it as a cancel. Counter a spell that way. I don't mind this. I really don't. I don't think it's not necessarily going to be the second choice after Counterspell in Pauper. I think you still have a lot of other effective Counterspell-like cards that can do that job a little bit better. You know, either they're more targeted, like a Dispel or a Spell Pierce or an Annul, or they do a little bit more like a Refute, which is a cancel that loots. You have options available to you, and I think those options are generally just a little bit better than this. But I think there's some decks that are going to play this. This is the first one I'm going to write that I want 4 copies of this for myself. Not because I have a deck immediately that I know this is going to go into, but you know, what if? What if? And I think this card has better what if potential than any other card we've seen so far today. So I'm going to grab 4 copies of Wild Unraveling and just see what happens. I'll give this I'll give it a 5. I'll give it a 5. That is a little cheating. I don't know how far it's going to go into Pauper playable, and maybe it won't be Pauper playable at all. But I think this is the first one that has a real chance, even more than that Tree Folk than we saw, and that's pretty good. Auntie Sentence is 1 and a black for a sorcery. It says choose 1. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land permanent card from it. That player discards that card, or target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. I know we just we just talked about the Wild Unraveling. This is my second card that is going on the list. Auntie's Sentence. This is great. I just look at the modal value you get from this. It's either a divest, which a divest that costs twice as much. That doesn't sound amazing. Or it's a stab that costs twice as much. That doesn't sound amazing. But I think and I think stab's also at instant speed, so having that at sorcery speed is also a bummer as well. But I think this becomes an excellent sideboard card that handles a number of different kinds of situations. Duress is one of the best sideboard cards you can play in black decks. And this doesn't take Duress's spot, but it does work really nicely in decks that force your opponents to discard. It's a really nice control-y card that works at kind of any point in the game. Because early in the game, early in the game, either of these modes are great. Either you take out an opponent's card that they, a creature or an enchantment or something that their deck runs around. Take the Relic of Progenitus out of their hand so you can start doing more of your graveyard shenanigan stuff. That's a great thing to do. That's really nice to be able to do that pretty early in the game. Or if they put down a creature pretty early in the game, giving it -2 toughness is more or less going to kill it. So that's pretty nice too. Those are both nice modes. Later in the game, when your duresses feel like they are just kind of dead cards in your hand because your opponent is, either is hellbent, they don't have any cards in their hand at all, or they're just like hoarding lands, or they know that you have duress at this point, so they've already played their instant spells and non-permanent spells. Non-creature spell. What is? Do I remember what duress is? I should remember what duress is, right? Duress is just non-creature, right? Non-creature, non-land. Yeah. Okay, that's. Whew. Getting old is bad, folks. Try not to do it if you can help it. But even late in the game, this is not necessarily a removal spell because your opponent's creatures are probably bigger than 2/2, but this is a way of you discouraging blocks or turning a good block into a bad block. And I kind of like that. This has a lot of value at a lot of points in the game. It's not going to be the best card you can play at any point in the game, but it's going to be a good card that you can play at any point in the game. And that's valuable. That's valuable. I want some copies of this. I don't think it's necessarily going to end up being a Pauper All-Star in the ways that some of these other cards could be. Dai Li Indoctrination from Avatar is a card that does something kind of similar to this. It does this part, or it might just be creature for Dai Li, or it earthbends too, which is kind of like giving -2/-2 to something if you block with it. So I think that card's just a little bit better, but this has a lot of value to it, and I want to pick up some copies, and I want to see how this works in Pauper. I like it. Did I give it a score? I don't think I gave it a score. I'm going to give this a 5.4. 5.4. Barbed Bloodletter is 1 and a black for an artifact equipment with flash. When this equipment enters, you attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains Wither until end of turn. Ooh. Wither says it deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. Equipped creature gets +1/+2, and it equips normally for 2. This I also really like. Like this is a cool card, man. This is, imagine putting this on a Gurmag Angler in Pauper, and what is your opponent supposed to do? Like they're gonna get a -5/-5 on any creature that gets hit with this thing. Or sorry, -6 because it gives it a power boost too. Ooh boy! Flash speed attaches instantly. The wither is really nice. Wither is just until end of turn. That's important to note. But this is a combat trick that does some really good removal on an opponent, even if you aren't able to kill the creature, which you probably will be. But even if you aren't able to kill the creature, you at least cripple it in a way where it's not going to affect you nearly as much anymore. I think this is good. 2 mana for a flash speed equipment like this. I dig it. I really do. Does it necessarily go in a Pauper deck? I don't know. It probably doesn't. Mono Black Sacrifice doesn't want this. Orzhov Blade doesn't really want. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Orzhov Blade wants this. You play a Glint Hawk, you bounce this back to your hand. You can play it again on a Glint Hawk. Swing in with it, or you swing in with the Glint Hawk. I don't know. I'll tell you what. I'm gonna buy 4 copies of this, and I'll see. Orzhov Blade is one of my favorite decks, mostly just because I'm a big Orzhov fan, and I also just really like bouncing stuff for value. So Blade is just asking to be my favorite deck, even though I think it's fallen a little bit out of favor. So I'm always kind of looking for another thing that makes Orzhov Blade a little bit better. And I don't know if this is the answer, but I like it. And I like the possibilities that I'm thinking for it. I'm gonna temper my expectations a little bit. I'm gonna give this a 4.5, but man, I do really like it. Vile Boggart, great name, incredible name, 10 out of 10 name. Single black mana for a 1/1 Goblin Assassin. When this creature dies, put a negative -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature. I don't mind this. We've seen creatures do this before. You know, this is kind of like a Mog Fanatic in some ways. It's not as good as a Mog Fanatic. In other ways, it's slightly better than a Mog Fanatic. But point is, we've seen this before. But this is a solid little 1-drop, especially in limited. But even outside of limited, I think you could see some value on this. Mono Black Sacrifice finds ways of sacking this guy, giving a -1/-1 to an opponent's creature. It's not bad. I think you generally in those decks you want more of the Infestation Sages than you want something like this, but I don't mind it. I could see it finding its place in a couple of decks. But I also think we've seen cards similar to this that aren't seeing play. I don't know. I don't feel as good about it, but I do think it's kind of neat, and I would give it a 3.6. Blighted Blackthorn is 4 and a black for a 3/7 Tree Folk Warlock. When this creature enters or attacks, you may blight 2. If you do, draw a card and lose 1 life. Okay. 5 mana for a 3/7. That doesn't really do much for me, especially when it's basically a vanilla creature. Whenever it enters or attacks, you can blight 2. So you have to put 2 -1/-1 counters on something. If you put it on this thing, you get a 1/5 for 5 mana that draws you a card and loses you a life. I don't really like that. I don't really like those stats. Or it kills a creature you control. Like you just kind of sacrifice a creature by putting the counters on it, and then it dies. You know, I will say, I'm pretty sure you can do this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can do this. This is how the rules should work. That if you put this into play. You cast this spell. It comes into play. It enters the battlefield. It blights 2, and you try to put your 2 negative -1 -1 counters on one of your other creatures. You could use, because that trigger then goes on the stack. You could then use your Carrion Feeder and sacrifice that creature before it gets the counters on it. And you wouldn't have to choose another creature to blight because you've already chosen your target. I'm 99% positive that's how it works. That's how it could work. And in that instance, maybe Mono Black Sack doesn't hate this, but Mono Black Sack does not need this. It costs 5 mana, and I think you have better ways of drawing cards in those decks. I know you have better ways of drawing cards in those decks. Really cool art, but I don't know. Yeah, it's a little bit repeatable, maybe with because it's enters or attacks, it gets that effect, but yeah, I don't know. 5 mana for a 3/7 that kind of doesn't really do anything is not my idea of a good time. I think we can give this like a 2.2. Blight Rot is 2 and a black for an instant. Put 4 -1/-1 counters on target creature. Nice removal piece in limited. Not a terrible removal piece in lots of formats, I would imagine. Does Pauper need this? I don't know. Take this for instance. I have. It's not going to be really good in that either, but I have a Dimir deck that it makes the artifact lands, the indestructible artifact lands, and earthbends them, or uses Kenku to animate them in some way. So that gives them +1/+1 encounters and makes them creatures, and they're indestructible. So what are you going to do about it? And this says, okay, here's what I'm going to do about it. I will end up removing those +1/+1 counters because these are -1/-1 counters and they'll counteract. And then I'll kill that creature. It doesn't matter that it's indestructible because when it's a 0/0, it dies anyway. So, okay, it dies. That's a way of getting around the indestructible, and it does with the Kenku. With the Kenku, that's a way of killing your opponent's land and their big indestructible creature. Hell yeah, I'm into it. If it's Earthbent, it's a little less useful because then it goes back to being a land, and maybe you can reanimate it again another time with another Kenku or another way to Earthbend it. But this is a way of getting around some indestructible creatures. That's okay. That's okay. I think it's like sideboard at best. It's 3 mana for a kill spell, which is generally too much in Pauper, and there's a lot of creatures that this won't kill. I've gone on and on about Mono Blue Terror and Gurmag Angler and that kind of stuff, and this doesn't kill those. It makes them a whole lot smaller, but at least in Terror's case, that has Ward 2. So now you're paying 5 mana for this effect, and I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Has some niche use, but I think it's a little too niche to see enough play. And I'd give it a 3. Just a 3. Boggart Prankster is 1 and a black for a 1/3 Goblin Warrior. When you attack, target attacking goblin you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Now, this does not say another, so you could choose this guy. 2 mana, 2/3. Okay. Or another goblin. So if you find another goblin that wants the +1 power more than this guy. Okay. Yeah, okay. The problem is, for Pauper at least, the goblin decks are really mono red. You're not playing a whole lot of black goblins. It's kind of the problem with commander decks as well, and other decks that are playing goblins, is there's just enough good mono red goblins that you really don't need to splash into black to get some of these other ones. And this one is fine. I don't think it's crazy enough that you go, oh, I gotta find a way to put black into my goblins deck for this guy. You don't really. I also like that it's whenever you attack. This guy doesn't even have to attack. It can just sit there on the battlefield. So even when you play it on turn 2, let's say you put a Raging Goblin out on turn 1. You put this out on turn 2. You attack with that Raging Goblin, and that thing gets 2/1 because of this. Pretty cool. I don't mind that. I think it has some solid use cases. but are they impactful enough to really change the way you'd play Pauper? Are you really going to find space in your deck for this? Sorry, again, I gotta say, limited. This thing's gonna be really cool. Outside of limited, I'm not so sure. Let's give this a. Would we give that a 3? Let's give this a 2.4. No. I'll 2.6. Better than that. Bog Slither's Embrace is 1 black for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, blight 1 or pay 3 to exile target creature. Okay. We've seen stuff like Eaten Alive that will make you pay more or sacrifice a creature. Those are pretty useful in Pauper. We've seen some of those cards do some work. This one, those Eaten Alive is, I think, like cost 1 a single black mana, and then you either have to pay 4 or sacrifice a creature. So this knows that this ability is going to be pretty good, so they're going to force you to at least pay 2 for this effect, and then choose whether you blight or pay 3. Because the blight isn't that bad. That's not necessarily sacrificing creature. That's just making a creature smaller. Exiling your opponent's creature with that is pretty good. Nice limited piece. Potentially useful in Pauper, but I generally think you don't want to hurt your stats on your creatures in Pauper. Your creatures generally are not that big in Pauper to afford you the opportunity to play a card like this. I don't know. I don't particularly love it. I'll give it like a 3.2. I think it's better than the -4/-4 counters, but only slightly. Dawn Hand Eulogist is 3 black for a 3/3 elf warlock with menace. It means it cannot be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. When this creature enters, you mill 3 cards. Then if there's an elf card in your graveyard, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. It's nice. Okay. I like that in Lorwyn Eclipsed, because you have these creature types that shifted, not shifted, but they added an extra color that they didn't normally have. Merfolk, generally a mono blue thing before Lorwyn, became more of an Azorius thing after Lorwyn, and Ixalan turned them Simic, so now they're kind of Bant. It's, but the idea was that Merfolk are blue, right? And this said, well, yeah, they're blue, but they're also a little white, right? Elves were almost completely black. I think there was a zombie elf that was like a Llanowar Dead, what it was called. So there was a Golgari elf out there. And Lorwyn said, well, what if the elves were more Golgari? What if we had more Golgari elves, black elves? Okay, interesting. Fairies, mostly mono blue, and then fairies kind of became Dimir around this time too. So you had these creature types going into. We just mentioned goblins. Goblins traditionally mono red, and now they're Rakdos with the introduction of the Lorwyn blocks. So I like that we've done that. I like that we've done that for more limited stuff, but for something like Pauper, you really are getting kind of the best of these things, of these tribes when you do play tribal decks. And when you play those tribal decks, you're not going to splash the other color for those other things. And this is one of those cases where I think, man, if this was in green, probably still wouldn't play it. But if this was in green, this would be this would be a much easier sell in mono green than it is in mono black, because you're not going to have many elf cards in your graveyard in your mono black deck. Maybe you find some changelings to go in there, but probably not. Love the art on this one. I think this is a pretty cool effect. 3/3 menace for 4 and a 4-point life swing and a mill if you want the mill, and some decks might, Dredge might want that, but Dredge isn't going to pay 4 mana for this effect. It wants to pay 2 mana for this effect, and it has lots of options to do so. Not very good for Pauper, but a cool card nonetheless. I'll give this a 2.5. Dream Caesar. This art is so. I wonder. Did Omar? I want to see this. Did Omar make the other fairy art for the Dream Spoiler Witches? I think is what it's called. No, this is all. Okay, I guess what I can do is just look up Dream Spoiler Witches, but Dream Spoiler. Yeah, Dream Spoiler Witches. Like that's kind of what they're going for here, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe they're going more for a Thoughtseize. They're probably going more for a Thoughtseize, right? Sorry to make this much longer than it has to be, but I want to know. Yeah, okay, they're going more for a Thoughtseize, right? It's a little fairy talking into somebody's ear. God, Thoughtseize. Original Lorwyn. Crazy, right? In this forest for some reason. Yeah, that I mean, it says Caesar, right? I kept looking at Dream, thinking of Dream Spoiler Witches, but no, this is Dream Caesar. This is going for a Thoughtseize for sure. Anyway, Dream Caesar's 3 and a black. I'm sure if I read the thing, it probably would also tell me this is definitely a Thoughtseize thing. 3 and a black for a 3/2 fairy rogue with flying. When this creature enters, you may blight 1. If you do, each opponent discards a card. Yep. Not exactly a Thoughtseize, but you see what they're doing. You see what they're doing here. Again, I don't like it. 4 mana for a fairy just is not going to be played in the fairies decks. And it probably wouldn't have been played in the fairies decks all that much anyway because it's black. You know, Dimir Fairies is a deck, but it's not because you play black fairies in that deck. Really, you play the black ninjas that have lifelink and gain you life. That's not what Dimir Fairies is about. I don't know. I just wish this was at least 2 mana cheaper and maybe just a 1/1 instead, and I would have a much easier time recommending it. It would still be a question about recommending it at that point, but this just puts it right out of playability. I think this is a 4 mana for this effect, and you have to blight 1 on your own guy at this point. I don't like this at all, really. I'll give this like a 1.3, but not a fan. Heirloom Ante is 2 and a black for a 4/4 Goblin Warlock. That's a pretty good rate. What's wrong with it? This creature enters with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. That there you go. Whenever another creature you control dies, surveil 1, then remove a -1/-1 counter from this creature. That's not too bad. That's not too bad, honestly. In a mono black sacrifice deck, this is a solid beater. You will get this up to a 4/4 very quickly. Maybe even the turn it comes into play. Getting a couple of surveils off of that is pretty nice. Those are all nice things. You could see them all working. But Carrion Feeder and the Beetle, forgot the Beetle's name exactly, but those, you have 8 copies. You have 8 copies of those cards. Those are the cards that really are in there. Maybe even the Gixian Infiltrator that also gets +1/+1 counters on it when a creature on your side dies. Is it when you sacrifice a thing? I think it's just when you sacrifice a thing. Maybe it's when anybody sacrifices a thing. I don't remember. Those are really the cards that are doing most of the damage in those decks. And a 4/4 that will not get any bigger than a 4/4 because of how this works, because of how the mechanics work in here. I don't think it really goes in that deck, and that's really the only deck I can think of that would consider playing this. It's still a pretty good rate for what you got here, but without free sacrifice outlets, I don't think this is going to make a bunch of impact really anywhere. And the decks that have free sack outlets have better cards to play than this. So it seems good, and it might even be good, but it's not good enough. We'll give it a 2.7. Moon Glove Extractor is 2 and a black for a 2/1 Elf Warlock. When this creature attacks you, draw a card and lose a life. 2/1 makes this a little too frail. I think this really needs 2 toughness at least to to make this viable. Still, this is a cool ability. We've seen cards that more or less do stuff like this, but being able to have a repeatable form of card advantage in that way, a repeatable Phyrexian Arena, but on a body. Okay. All right. I mean, it's a Phyrexian Arena on a body. That's all right. That's all right. But, it gets taken out too quickly by anything. Like this could just say, because it's a 2/1, maybe it trades with a creature and you draw one card and you lose one life. Is that worth it for 3 mana? That's kind of sorcery speed, and you have to wait until the next turn to draw the card. I'm just thinking if this card was worded differently to make it sound like, okay, here's all the same value that you're going to get over that 2-turn ability that you have here. Is that really a big deal? The answer is probably no. But also consider, hey, you're in black. You have ways of removing your opponent's creatures so this thing can swing in freely. You're doing 2 damage. You're taking 1 damage, but you're also drawing a card. If you're able to do that, maybe you're able to find more removal so this thing keeps hitting your opponent and keeps drawing you those cards every turn. I see the value there, but I think it's just too frail. It dies too easily, and that makes it something more like a what did I give this? A 2.7, 2.6, I guess, for this guy. Scarblade Scout is 1 and a black for a 2/2 elf scout with lifelink, and when this creature enters, you mill 2 cards. We have a card like this already, right? It's from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Black Outlaws and Legal and Pauper. Forgot what this guy's called. Yeah, there you go. Desperate Bloodseeker. This is just Desperate Bloodseeker, right? 2 mana, 2/2, lifelink. This says target player mills 2 cards. So in some ways, even better than this. But elves matter to some people. Again, elves in black, not so much. But I would probably just continue to go with the Desperate Bloodseeker if I was playing this. Vampires, I think, are certainly more played in Pauper. Well, okay, sorry. Elves are definitely more played in Pauper than vampires. But if you're in a black deck, vampires are much more played than elves. So I still think this guy's maybe the better way to go, even though I almost would never mill my opponents. I like this guy a little bit better than this Elf Scout, even though I like the art on this Elf Scout way better. So I'll give this thing a, limited, really good card. A Grizzly Bear with lifelink. Yeah, man. 2 mana. That's great. I don't mind that at all. But outside of that, this is just another card that you see and you go, yeah, okay, that's fine. Maybe it goes in a cube, right? 2, I guess. Probably doesn't even deserve a 2, but I'll give it a 2. Scarblade's Malice is a single black mana for an instant. Target creature you control gains Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. When that creature dies this turn, you create a 2/2 black and green elf creature token. Okay, I generally don't love these because if you're playing this, you're kind of just asking for the creature to die. And it's nice that you have a backup plan to put another creature on the board. Also, this is, in some ways, 1 mana for a 2/2. That's a pretty good rate. That's a really good rate. The Death Touch means that you're probably going to kill an opponent's creature. The lifelink keeps you a little bit alive, although if you're playing this on one of your creatures and thinking it's going to die, it's probably a pretty small creature, so maybe you're not getting that much life out of it. In some ways, this is it's not really a protection spell exactly, but if your opponent is about to kill your creature, okay, the lifelink and Death Touch didn't really do anything because they were playing a removal spell, but you do at least get something back for it for a single mana. That's okay. And this has a lot of modal possibilities. This is a bit of a combat trick. If you have it on a big creature and you play this just to gain a bunch of life back and maybe kill a couple of opponent's creatures that are trying to double block or maybe even triple block, yeah, there's something here with that. But it works semi well in a lot of different situations, but it doesn't work great in any of those situations. And I think for that it ends up something like a 3. I will look for some copies of this in limited though. I think it's not too bad there. Our last card of this page is our first card from the red cards. It is Bone Club Berserker. It's 3 in a red for a 2/4 Goblin Berserker. This creature gets +2/+0 for each other goblin you control. Man, that sounds really nice, doesn't it? It sounds real nice. But in a goblins deck, you're playing a lot of goblins real early. I think you're wanting to try to win the game on turn 4, not play a creature. I think this is too slow for basically any mono red deck, especially a goblins based one. Yeah, I don't really love it there. I don't love it there, but it seems like it'd be so good. How do you make this card better? If you made this 3 mana and it only gave you +1/+0 for each other goblin you control, maybe. 4 mana is just too much. It's just too much. I don't think you play this card, but it has some real potential, right? And again, in limited, this thing's gonna be really cool, especially with all the changelings in this set. We haven't seen too many changelings yet, but there's some interesting ideas. Brambleback Brute, easy for me to say, is 4/5 for a giant warrior. And this creature enters with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. You can pay 1 and a red and remove a counter from this creature. Target creature can't block this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Kind of neat. So you're getting a 2/3 for 3 mana. Not the best rate. But you do have the ability to make it even bigger and get some extra bonuses at that time to make a target opponent's creature not be able to block. That's okay. You get to swing in, maybe even swing in with this guy after you've removed a counter, and you just get to punch a couple more times. It's an okay card. I don't really see it being played in Pauper. These can't block effects. There are lots of them around in Pauper, and most of them don't see play. They're pretty good abilities, but just generally not good enough. Let's give it a 2. Burning Curiosity is 2 in a red for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may blight 1. You exile the top 2 cards of your library. If the spell's additional cost was paid, exile the top 3 cards instead. Till the end of your turn, you may play those cards. We have 2 mana versions of this that exile 2 cards. Is it worth it to pay 1 more mana and the blight to get a 3rd card? I'm not sure that it is. Yeah, I don't really like this much at all. I'll give it a 1.7. Cinder Strike is a single red mana for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you may blight 1. Cinder Strike deals 2 damage to target creature. It deals 4 damage to that creature instead if the spell's additional cost was paid. 4 damage for a single mana is pretty good. Only to a creature, only at sorcery speed. Having to put a -1/-1 on your... Sorry, -1/-1 on your creature is not the best. I don't know. It's fine. It's fine, but it's not gonna replace your lightning bolts in Pauper. Let's not get crazy. It's halfway decent removal effect. Let's go 3.4. 4 damage to a creature for a single mana. Hard to deny the value that can be. Elder Ante is 2 and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Warlock. When this creature enters, you create a 1/1 black and red Goblin creature token. I don't like it. I know for the rate, it seems fine, right? 3 mana for basically 3/3 in power and toughness, and split up across 2 creatures makes it a little harder for opponents to get all the way through, but I just think it's a little too normal. It doesn't do much. Doesn't do nearly enough for me. Yeah, I don't particularly like it. I will give it a 1.8. Yeah, maybe. Let's just give it a 2. Let's give it a 2. Doesn't really matter. Enraged Flamecaster is 2 and a red for a 3/2 elemental sorcerer with reach. Whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, this creature deals 2 damage to each opponent. Interesting. Interesting. I don't think Pauper really wants this because you have enough cards that do this kind of effect, but faster. Because I'm thinking your gutter snipes and those kinds of things that you can really stack those up. You can play your instants and sorceries, your non-creature spells, and really stack up that non-combat damage. This guy in Pauper, you're gonna get this maybe once a turn. Because you're in most formats, you're gonna really get this once a turn. So this is really nice in something like Commander, I guess, when you can accrue this kind of value over a number of turns. Maybe in Limited, where the game's a little slower, so you are able to accrue bits of damage over a number of turns. Pauper's too fast for this, and I can't. You're also in red, so how many times are you playing spells over 4 mana value in red? It's not outside of the realm of possibility. It happens. If you flash back your Fire Blast. No. What's that called? Is it called Fire Blast? am I just thinking about Pokemon here? Fire Blast. That's a card. What if I just said it a few more times? Fire Blast. Not Fire Blasty. Fire Blast, yeah. What am I thinking? Fire Blast. That is absolutely the card. Flashback Fire Blast. Or not flashback, but you sacrifice instead of paying its cost. It's still a 6 mana cost card. It works. That would work with that. Yeah, I still just don't think it goes in a Pauper deck. It's cool though. Also like that it has reach. It's not every day you see something like that. Like if this thing had a bow in its hands, I guess then we go, oh yeah, reach, that makes perfect sense. But mono red card, 3/2 is not bad. There's a lot to like about this guy. I just don't think I really like him in Pauper all that much. I'll give him a 2.6. Feed the Flames, 3 and a red for an instant. Feed the Flames deals 5 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, you exile it instead. It's okay. 4 mana, only targets a creature. The exile is kind of nice, but too expensive. Way too expensive, especially in red. Too expensive. Yeah, red wants to go much faster than this. Let's give this a 2.1. Flame Chain Mauler is 1 and a red for a 2/2 elemental warrior. For 1 and a red, this creature gets +1/+0 and gains menace until end of turn. I kind of don't mind that. I mean, you have to pay the creature's cost over and over and over again to get this effect, but 3/2 with menace on turn 3. Okay. Potentially even a 4/2 with menace on the next turn, where it probably dies, but you make an opponent double block. There's kind of cool tricks that you can do with that. You can even do it at instant speed. The menace doesn't really help you at instant speed, but the power boost, not too bad. I don't hate it. I don't really see what deck it goes into. Red, like I said, wants to go fast and generally would rather play 1 or even 2 more creatures for that cost, or 2 lightning bolts for that cost, rather than wasting it on Flame Chain Mauler. But I think there's some places, especially in the limited environment, where that's a cool ability. That's pretty cool. 2.5. Flamekin Guildweaver is 3 and a red for a 4/3 elemental sorcerer with trample. When this creature enters, you create a treasure token. That's okay. Elementals, it seems like are really want to play bigger spells. This is 4 mana value, so it works with a lot of the other elementals in this set. Giving you the treasure token is going to allow you to pay 4 mana value even more on the next turn, or maybe even this turn, depending on how much mana you got set up. But then you just get a 4/3 body, 4/3 trampling body. That's also not too bad. I don't know what Pauper deck wants this, but I think we have some other big creatures. This doesn't even really go in ramp, right? Like your cruel ramp decks. I don't think this goes in there. You'd rather play your the Jewel Thief instead, which does a lot of this, but it costs one less, and it's one less point of power. But I think Jewel Thief's probably just the better card overall. Being able to play Jewel Thief on turn 3 is, I think, just a better deal than playing this on turn 4. Yeah, I think Jewel Thief's a better card. Jewel Thief's a great card. This is okay. This is okay though. I'll give this a 2.9. Gristle Glutton, hell yeah, baby, is 1 and a red for a 1/3 Goblin Scout. You can tap it in Blight 1, discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Whew. Okay, so in some instances, you can imagine this if you're only putting the Blight counters on this guy, because you're tapping him all the time. How much are you really blocking with him? Maybe you block with him the first turn he's out, and then at the end of your opponent's turn, you put the -1, -1/-1 counter on him, and you get to rummage. Okay, and then he blocks he blocks a couple of times maybe, but he doesn't really get to do the damage, only the one time. You could put the blight counters on your other creatures. I don't know. I'm not a huge rummage fan, and we have too many discard 1, draw 2 effects in red in Pauper that I don't really want this guy. If you're doing sneaky snacker stuff, those cards get your sneaky snacker immediately because it draws your 3rd card. This guy only helps you draw your 2nd card. I don't love that. I don't think he does nearly enough. Even at 2 mana, I'm just not a big fan. Not a big fan. I will give this as much as a 2.1, but I'm not excited about it at all. Kulrath Zealot is 5 and a red. Whew, 5 and a red for a 6/5 Elemental Warrior. When this creature enters, you exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. Well, if you got 6 mana, you're going to be able to play whatever you exile. That's for sure. And this guy does have the basic land cycling for 1 and a red. We talked about the usefulness of this. I think 6 mana over that 5 mana blue one that we saw. The blue one is just better. Just better. I think elementals in this set are mostly sticking to Izzet. There are elementals in other colors as well, but most of our elementals, especially at these lower rarities, are going to be in Izzet. So maybe we will only see 2 of these guys, and not for the other colors. We didn't see it for black, and we didn't see it for white. So I'm guessing that is just the case, which makes these cyclers make a lot more sense. That they're basic land cycling instead of island cycling or mountain cycling. Interesting, though, that it's going to make finding your colors in non-red, non-blue decks more difficult, because you'd find those cyclers in every single color in previous sets. I wonder what that's going to do to the limited environment. Anyway, Pauper, this is extremely useless. I would say it's a 1.2 in Pauper. Limited, I like him. I like him. Again, having the basic land cycling is just cool, and then having a nice big threat on the table that also wouldn't give you exactly card advantage, but kind of replaces itself by putting another card out there that you can play either that turn or the next turn. It's not bad. Red doesn't mind that at all. 6 mana is a lot, though. 6 mana is a lot. Did I give this a score? I don't think I did. Oh, no, I did. It's 1.2. It's pretty bad for Pauper. Reckless Ransacking is 1 and a red for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+2 until end of turn. Wow, that's a pretty good boost. And you create a treasure token. That's also pretty good. At instant speed, oh boy. That's not bad. That's not bad. I don't know if this necessarily goes in Pauper, but I'm liking it. I'm gonna grab myself a couple copies of this. Does this go in Gruul ramp decks? Probably not. They don't really need the combat trick so much, but I don't know. Also, imagine making your jewel thief into a 6/5, and you've made another treasure token. I don't know. I think this is pretty good. Pretty good. Making the treasure token super nice. Super nice. Affinity decks might even want something like this. Combat trick for a lot of those decks. It's interesting. It's pretty interesting. Huh. Yeah, I like it. I'll give it a 5 in Pauper. I'll give it a 5. I'm kind of a fan. Tweeze is our final red card. It is 2 and a red for an instant. Tweeze deals 3 damage to any target. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. It's just too normal. Like, it's a lightning bolts and a rummage. But it costs 3 mana. And I mean, a lightning bolt and a grab the prize costs 3 mana for both those cards combined, and you get way more value than you get out of this card. I don't really like this at all. I barely even like it for limited, but I don't like this card much at all. I'll give it a 1.4. On to the green. Assert Perfection is 1 and a green for a sorcery that says target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. Little bite effect. The power boost is probably what moves this up from single mana to 2 mana. But power boost isn't terrible. Helps to make the bite work. I also generally like bites over fights. Just they work better, more or less. Still kind of normal though. If the green creatures are significantly sized, maybe this is a little bit better, and they should be. It's green, right? But generally, this is not my favorite kind of way to remove something, and I think the +1 power is generally not enough to really make enough of a difference. And in normal Pauper games, that was all kind of for limited, but in just Pauper in general, we just have better effects than this. You play Ram Through instead of this, and you kind of like basically every time Ram Through is an instant, and that kind of open and shut case on that one of which is better. I'll give this I mean, it's still removal. I'll give it a 2.6. Crossroads Watcher is 2 and a green for a 3/3 Kithkin Ranger with trample. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. It's almost good, right? It's the power boost. If you're in Kithkin, maybe this is like the top end of your Kithkin deck, and you're able to put in lots of little tokens or something and turn this from a 3/3, and on one turn maybe it gets to be a 6/3, and you swing in for some pretty big trample damage. That's all right. But again, we just talked about something like Jewel Thief, which is a 3/3 trampler for the same cost, and it makes you a treasure token. And I think that's just a much more useful ability than this. Like, this is okay, but I would want it to be +1/+1 encounters or something before I got really excited about it. So not the biggest fan. Let's give this thing. And I'm saying +1/+1 encounters generally for Pauper. I understand that in this limited environment we are dealing with lots of -1/-1 counters. I'm sorry, -1/-1 counters. And they generally are not having you mix the two in a limited environment. I understand from a design perspective why you would do this over +1/+1 counters, but to make this playable in Pauper, yeah, doesn't really work there. Not as well as it needs to. So let's give this a. I'll still give it a halfway decent score. I'll give it like a 3.2 and move on. Dawn's Light Archer, 2 and a green for a 4/2 elf archer with flash and reach. That's actually a pretty solid removal spell in green. I think this is better than a lot of the fight and bite effects. A flash takes out something that potentially flies or even something on the ground. This is just a solid removal spell in green. I kind of like it. Especially in limited, not really in Pauper. Obviously, there's just other stuff you do that does a little bit more, but I wouldn't think of this as a creature. I mean, you could think of this as a creature if you're playing at the end of an opponent's turn and you get this in, and now you get to swing into your opponent with this 4/2 guy. All right, that can be cool too. But for the most part, I think you should be thinking more about this as a combat trick or as a removal spell to come in and take out an opponent's creature. For 3 mana in green, especially, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. Let's give it a 2.5 and move to Gilt Leaf's Embrace for 2 and a green. Lots of 2 and a green. This is an enchantment aura with flash and enchants a creature. When this aura enters, enchanted creature gains trample and indestructible until end of turn. And enchanted creature gets +2/+0. I kind of don't hate this. You know, we saw that blue hexproof protection enchantment, and now we see a green one that gives indestructible instead of hexproof, but it also gives trample and the power boost. This is going to be a nice finisher in some limited games. I like the art too. I think this is some really good art. Vulcan Baga always is putting together good quality work here. I don't think this goes into Pauper decks. I think most of the cards that you want to beat down with in green will already have the trample. And this being at flash speed is interesting. It is kind of just a combat trick at that point. But I still, I don't think this goes into Pauper. This will be a really cool limited card, though. I kind of dig the card. I kind of want some copies just because I know it's going to be a good limited card. And maybe like a blue-green enchantments kind of deck. I could see that being a cool archetype kind of thing you can go with in this, even though there isn't a creature type in Lorwyn that really embodies blue and green. You're gonna have to kind of mix tribes on that one, but I think the card type archetype could make that pretty decent. Anyway, for Pauper specifically, 2.4. No, I can give it better than that. I'll give it like a 2.6. It's intriguing. It's intriguing, but I don't think generally it's good enough. Great Forest Druid is 1 and a green for a 0/4 Tree Folk Druid. And did I say Tree Folk? It's Great Forest Druid. That's what I said, right? It's a Tree Folk Druid. It's 0/4, and you can tap to add 1 mana of any color. It's okay. It's okay. Tree Folks, not going to be good enough. Druids, there are some Druid decks, not really in Pauper. And this might go into the Druids deck, but a lot of those Druids need to tap Druids down to make mana of any color. This guy already does that, kind of. Not kind of. He already does that. So I don't know. I don't know if this guy's really necessary. In limited, hell yeah, man. You have this big body that just blocks for days and can also ramp you. There's a good piece there. But I don't know if it's much more than that. It's always nice to have cheaper tree folk too. You know, tree folk being generally like dragons, like giants. There aren't a whole lot of cheap ones of those. So having something that you can play in your Pauper deck that does so. Yeah, it's all right. But you know, if you want ramp in your Pauper deck, you play Arbor Elf, you play Land of War Elves. You have those things on one. You don't really need this. Even though it makes other colors of mana. Play your Wild Growth, you play your Utopia Sprawls. So many other good ways of ramping even faster in Pauper. Let's give this guy a 2.8. That seems high. I'm going to stick with it, but I do think that seems high. Lissalana Informant is 1 and a green for a 3/1 Elf Scout. When this creature enters or dies, you surveil 1. That's decent value. Potentially trading with an opponent's creature, getting a couple of surveils, only 2 mana. That's a good deal. That is just good, solid little value deal. Pauper doesn't really matter, but it's I don't mind the value that you're getting out of a card like that. It's all right. And potentially even 3, maybe even 6 damage to your opponent if you're able to play your cards right, or if your opponent plays their cards wrong, you can get quite a bit of extra value out of this guy, which I don't mind either. Let's give him a 2. Yeah, let's go with 2. Midnight Tilling is 1 and a green for an instant that says mill 4 cards, and you may return a permanent card from among them to your hand. Oh, we are so close. We are so close to putting Malevolent Rumble in standard. but they're not going to do that. Malevolent Rumble is a little too good. It's trying to make this enticing, though. It's instant speed instead of its sorcery speed, but it also doesn't make the Scion, and the token is kind of a big deal for Malevolent Rumble as not just a body, but as a ramp piece as well. And I think this is cool, but Dredge doesn't really want this either because you want the creatures that mill because they are also creatures in your graveyard. This will not be a creature in your graveyard, and so your Lotleth Giant doesn't count it. It's interesting. It's interesting. It's almost a good Pauper piece, but the deck that wants it, Dredge or even Spy combo, doesn't see the value in it because it's missing kind of the important couple parts that you need from a card like this. Either it needs it to be a permanent card. If you mill more of these when you play this, you're gonna feel real bad. But I could see this working in the Elves deck in Limited. It makes a whole lot of sense in the Elves deck. It wants Elves in the graveyard to do lots of other mechanics, and in that instance, this does some cool stuff, or it gets back a cool thing. It is among them, so you couldn't have basic land cycled one of your big elemental guys and then milled the 4 cards and then grabbed that back. It has to be one of the 4, and that is kind of a bummer. But in Limited, that's milling a 4th of your deck at that point, or not a 4th, a 10th of your deck, milling a 10th of your deck at that point, and that maybe you will find the good thing that you need, and that's not too bad. In Pauper, stick with Malevolent Rumble and or the Town Greeters or the other cards like that. Those are just generally better for your needs. The instant speed is interesting. Let's go with a 3. 3 sounds maybe a touch high, but I kind of don't mind it. Miss Meadow Council is 4 and a green for a 4/3 Kithkin Advisor. This spell costs 1 less to cast if you control a Kithkin. When this creature enters, you draw a card. It's kind of normal. Maybe it's 4 mana instead of 5 mana, but that's all it can be. Draws a card, replaces itself. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not really enamored by it. I'd give it a 2.1, I guess. Safe Right Cavalry. We're on second to last page. We've got 6 more cards after this page, but we're getting there. Safe Right Cavalry. Oh, also we are gonna have like basic lands and stuff that we can skip, so we're getting close. Safe Right Cavalry is 3 and a green for a 4/4 Elf Warrior. This creature can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. I don't mind that. And then you can pay 5. Target elf you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Okay. This is interesting, right? You got to find a way to get this trample in Pauper. But if you do, this is something that you a finisher with your infinite combo. If you have the infinite mana, you just pump this in. This thing becomes infinite, and your opponent's. I guess the first part doesn't matter at that point, but it also just in Limited, this keeps your opponent from really blocking this well at all. I don't mind that. This is potentially a good finisher in that format. Pauper, I think it's cute, but it's not impactful enough. I think your opponent's going to be able to make. There's too many decks that just make blockers basically infinitely that will stop this guy at every turn, unless you're able to give it trample. If you're able to give it that enchantment that we saw before that gives trample and indestructible until end of turn. Now it is end of turn, so maybe that's not even quite enough, but I don't know. There's some stuff you could potentially do with this. I don't hate it. It's a good body. 4/4 for 4 mana. That's all right. And then be able to pump it later. Pump it potentially on the next turn and swing in with a 6/6. Can only be blocked by 1 guy. You're gonna take down your opponent's creatures quite a bit. Did I give this a Pauper score? I don't know if I did. It's going to be like a 2.4. Surly Farrier is 1 and a green for a 2/2 Kithkin citizen. You can tap it, and target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains vigilance until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Okay, so it's kind of like what is it called? Like Angelic Spirit. Is that what that's called? The one that taps to give +1/+1 to a creature of yours. This guy kind of does that too. As a sorcery, kind of sucks, but I guess as a sorcery makes sense because they're also giving it vigilance. They don't want somebody to try to give something vigilance and then it's already tapped down, so the vigilance doesn't matter. There's a like a tutorializing of the game for players, and this is like a subtle way of teaching them when they should activate abilities. So when they play more complicated cards, they have a better idea when to play them. It does make it a little less interesting that you can't use this as a combat trick. But there's lots of convoke stuff that I guess this doesn't matter too much because you're tapping one creature to make sure one other creature doesn't get tapped. That's not really the same thing. But the vigilance. This guy's kind of a nothing, so giving the +1/+1 to somebody who is something, and the vigilance keeps that going. It's okay. But at the end of the day, it's just a grizzly bear with a little gravy on it, and in this case, I don't particularly love it. I'll give it a 2.5. Tend the Sprigs is 2 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. If you control 7 or more lands and or tree folk, create a 3/4 green tree folk creature token with reach. It's going to be kind of hard to get to that many lands in Pauper. I think the format's just a little too quick generally. Even in Golgari ramp decks, and in Golgari ramp deck, or not Golgari, Gruul ramp decks, and in Gruul ramp decks, this is probably also a little too slow. I think the 3/4 creature is nice, but you're going to be able to ramp into much bigger creatures at that point. Is this the worst hit off your Cascade guys? Maybe not, because it does it in the late game when you're cascading. It's not only the land, but it is at least a body. So it's not just one of your pure ramp pieces that kind of feels bad. Like I got a bad hit there. This at least could give you a body, even if it's not as good of a body as you're looking for off a Cascade. It does give you a body. I kind of don't hate it. I'd have to test it out in a Gruul ramp deck, and I don't have one of those. I've got some of the pieces for it, but I think that's really the only deck that it might go in. I don't know. Maybe it finds a place somewhere, but I just don't see it. I don't think you're going to have enough tree folk, because the only tree folk you're going to have on the battlefield in Pauper really is Generous Ent, and that costs 7 mana or 6 mana. It costs a lot. It costs a lot to get a Generous Ent on the table. So I don't think you're really getting the Generous Ent to count towards the tree folk part here, where it's lands or tree folk to get the new tree folk token. I just don't think that's going to proc enough to really make a difference. It's kind of interesting though. I'll give it a 3.9. Kind of on the cusp. Unforgiving Aim is 2 and a green for an instant. Choose 1. Destroy target creature with flying. Destroy target enchantment. Or create a 2/2 black and green elf creature token. I don't hate this. It's a little bit more expensive than I want to pay for my green removal, but it does a lot of really good stuff at instant speed. Taking out a creature with flying, that could be huge. Taking out an enchantment could be huge. 3 mana is a lot for that. Creating a 2/2 black and green elf creature token, creating a creature at instant speed is pretty good, whether you're doing it as a combat trick or as as something at the end of your opponent's turn, just to put a creature out and keep it pretty protected and be able to swing it with the next turn. Kind of gives it pseudo haste in a way. This does a lot. This does a lot of stuff. I don't know if it does enough in Pauper. I kind of would rather just have like pick your poison, which is 1 mana, and it makes your opponent choose stuff, so your opponent gets a little bit more agency about it. But I think you do okay. I'd kind of rather have Heritage Reclamation or Origin of Metal Bending that can take out artifacts or enchantments, kind of that naturalize effect or another thing. But as a way of dealing with some big flyers, how many big flyers are you really dealing with in Pauper? It's not a ton, right? It's little fairies, for the most part. A core Skyfisher, maybe he's one of the bigger flying creatures you really deal with in Pauper, unless somebody, a Segu Wildling is probably one of the bigger creatures that you see in actual factual Pauper decks that deal with the meta. But generally, I'd say you're not really dealing with like big dragons and other giant flyers that you need to worry about in Pauper. I don't think this is as useful as it might look, but it is still pretty useful. It's okay. Let's give it a 3.1. All right, our final solid green card here is Wildvine Pummeler. It is 6 and a green for a 6/5 giant berserker with Vivid. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each color among permanents you control. It's also got Reach and Trample. I'm interested. I'm interested to see how you can make this work. In like how are we making this work in Pauper? We don't really have any cards that give you all colors. We don't have a ton of multicolored cards, but can we get this down? If we can get this down by 3 colors, you play this in maybe like Jund Wildfire or something like that. I don't think you really play this in Jund Wildfire, but just go with me on this one. If you take this down by 3, you make this a 4 mana 6/5 with Reach and Trample. That's a pretty good deal. I think you need to take it down by at least 3 mana for this to really matter. I don't think you're going to play it in pretty much any of your dual color, your 2-color decks. It really has to be in 3 or more colors, and there just aren't that many decks that do that. I'm trying to think of some other decks that want to play multiple colors, like maybe like Slivers, because Slivers can play like the one-off Winged Sliver or the one-off Sliver that gives first strike or something in red, and so you're able to play some more colors. But this thing's not a Sliver, so you don't care. It's your Slivers are probably going to be bigger than this guy by the time that you could play this guy. So I don't know. I really don't know. But I think there's maybe something there. And if you can get to a situation where you have, especially in something like Commander, where you have a 5-color Commander, you have the that enchantment that makes everything that you have all colors. That's rare. Leyline of the Guild Pack. I can't remember what it's called. Maybe that was it. Being able to get this guy down to 2 mana 6/5. Damn, that could be pretty cool. But in Pauper, I'm gonna give this guy a 3, and I think that might be too high unless there's something else that I can't think of that is there some crazy way of getting 5 colors pretty quickly on the table? I don't know that there is. Like if there's an instant that says this card is all colors and it's only for 1 turn, but you pay a single mana for it. I don't think there's one of those cards out there, but if there were, you play that and you play this for 2 mana, so it's like you got a 3 mana 6/5 Reach Trample. That's not bad. Anyway, yeah, I think something like a 3.2 for this is quite all right. Multicolored card time. We're going to deal with some hybrid mana symbols. We'll start with Marrow Sky Swimmer. I think on a previous episode of my rating different Pauper cards, I said Lorwyn was the beginning of hybrid. That's not true. It was Ravnica, obviously, but we had a lot more hybrid cards in here than we had gotten in Ravnica. I think they did more with hybrid here. Anyway, Marrow Sky Swimmer, 3 and Azorius. So those hybrid mana symbols where you can pay either white, blue, or white-blue, or blue-white. But for that cost, you get a 2/2 Merfolk Soldier with Convoke. And it also has Flying and Vigilance. And when this creature enters, you create a 1/1 white and blue Merfolk creature token. All right, this seems overcosted on its face, right? But the Convoke makes it a whole lot cheaper. The Convoke is also pretty good with the hybrid mana symbols because they can take out you can use white creatures for it or blue creatures for those pips. That's not too bad. It makes another body when it comes into play, so it makes it much easier to tap down and convoke for the next one that you play. That's all right. And 2/2 flying vigilance is a pretty solid kind of little body there. I don't think it's quite good enough. I think it's still kind of a lot of effort to get a 2/2 flying vigilance and a 1/1 body. But there's kind of something there. And it's got the Richard Kane Ferguson art, so you got to love that part at the very least. Let's give this a 2.8 and keep going. Mischievous Sneakling. This is our first Changeling. Oh, I'm so glad Changelings are back. They're so cool. Mischievous Sneakling is 1 and a hybrid Dimir mana for a 2/2 shapeshifter with a Changeling and Flash. So it's every creature type. That's what the Changeling part means. And Flash. I wish this did just a tiny bit more. If it surveilled one when it came into play, I think we'd really be talking. But still, as something that's every creature, it works in a lot of different typal strategies wherever you're going with that. And it's also a Grizzly Bear with Flash, which is not too bad. I mean, we saw lots of other Grizzly Bear variants over the course of this recording, of going down this list, and some of those Grizzly Bear variants I gave pretty bad scores to. I shouldn't give this too good of a score. I shouldn't. I really shouldn't. But you also have to consider this with all of these changelings, is that how does this work in Slivers? As Slivers, while it is still kind of a meme deck, if it's in the right colors, and generally the right colors for Slivers are green and white, if you can find more changelings for that, maybe you can make some broken stuff with those. If they have extra mechanics on top of them to buff, or that those Slivers will continue to buff, that can be good. This is potentially something in Elves that will play things that Priest of Titania that taps for all the elves you control. Other things that will give a specific elf something. Those are also interesting cards that can be used. We see the I forgot the shapeshifter guy. He's got Changeling. It's from Kaldheim, that exiles an artifact or enchantment if you remove a creature from your graveyard. But he's an elf, because he's everything, and elves will play that. There are some other decks that also potentially want these as well. Like I have a dragons deck that has cards that make dragons cheaper, and changelings are pretty good fodder for that as well. To have something that lower rarities. Not lower rarities. They're all low rarities. It's Pauper at lower mana values. So we'll have to keep all that in mind when you're looking at changelings, because they could make a difference. But this one, just a Grizzly Bear with Flash, it's not the best. Not the best. I'll give this like a 2.2. Chaos Spewer is 2 and a hybrid Rakdos for a 5/4 Goblin Warlock. When this creature enters, you may pay 2 if you don't blight 2. Okay. You can pay 5 mana for a 5/4, or you can blight 2 and also get a 5/4. So you could potentially sacrifice another creature by giving it the -2/-2, or you give this guy the -2/-2, and you're really getting a 3/2 for 3, which isn't great. It doesn't have any other ability outside of that. If this thing had Menace or something, I could see maybe this being a little bit more interesting. It's still, even if this was just said 3 mana, sacrifice a creature when it enters the battlefield. So you sack a small guy and you get to keep a 5/4 on the table. I don't know. It's not bad. It's not bad. Pauper, I think you give this a... Goodness. What do you give this in Pauper? Like a... let's give it a 2. It's still like just a vanilla creature. I don't think it's all that great. Gangly Stompling, hell of a name, is 2 and a Gruul hybrid for a 4/2 shapeshifter. It's got Changeling and it's got Trample. Slivers might want this. It's a little expensive for Slivers, but Slivers generally don't have a way to give Trample at low mana values. So having a nice big guy with Trample, I don't know. Something to consider. I'll give it a 2.4. Wary Farmer is 1, and Hybrid Selesnya for a 3/3 Kithkin Citizen. At the beginning of your end step, if another creature enters the battlefield under your control this turn, surveil 1. It's a little weak. I mean, it is 3 mana for a 3/3, so that's not too bad. And it is potentially a surveil every turn, but that requires you to put a creature down every single turn to get this. I don't know. It's in limited vanilla 3/3s are okay for 3 mana, but I think outside of that, when you're thinking about Pauper specifically, this isn't much to write home about. I'd give it like a 1.5. Prideful Feastling, ooh, I like this guy, is 2 and a hybrid Orzhov. That's mostly why I like it. For a 2/3 shapeshifter. It's got Changeling and it's got Lifelink. All right. Does this go in Coggates? Maybe. I think Outlaw Medic is probably still a little better. It's cheaper. Draws the card when it dies. Those are generally going to be more useful. But this is a life-linking 2/3 for 3 mana. It's not the worst. Does this go in Slivers? It's white. Slivers can play that. Slivers don't generally have lifelink in the Slivers deck. So this gives that deck... I'd say, honestly, this is a sideboard card for Slivers. If you're playing Slivers and you're like, man, I'm just dying to mono red burn or something, this is not the worst card to play. This is, you put out your Muscle Sliver on turn 2, you put this thing out on turn 3, and you've got a 3/4 Sliver Changeling. Yeah, you've got a 3/4 with lifelink. Then the next turn you can dump a couple more Muscle Slivers or the whatever the other green 2 mana one that gives all slivers +1/+1. I don't know, man. I think this is a sideboard card in Slivers. I really do. I'll give this a 4. I think it's 4. Flaring Cinder. In fact, actually, I want to write that down. I want to write this one down just so I remember it. Prideful Feastling? Yeah. Prideful Feastling. Let's grab a few copies of that just to make sure we got them. Flaring Cinder is 1 and is it hybrid for a 3/2 elemental sorcerer. When this creature enters, and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Yeah, I don't know. It's cool that it does it with itself and then also in the future. But I'm just not gonna like these 4 mana value cards in Pauper. I don't think you get to play that effect enough. I don't think you build the deck to make it play enough. I think even while it has the hybrid pips, this does really limit the kinds of decks that it can go in. I don't really love it. I'll give this a 1.4. I'm really not a fan. Stoic Grove Guide is 4 and a Golgari hybrid for a 5/4 Elf Druid for 1 and a Golgari hybrid. You can exile this card from your graveyard and create a 2/2 black and green elf creature token. Activate only as a sorcery. I don't think this goes in the Pauper decks, but it is interesting that it is a way for Dredge to get another body on the table if they needed to. If you mill this into your graveyard, who cares? Sure, it's nice to have the 5/4 body instead, but you can pay a much cheaper mana cost and still get a 2/2 body. That's not bad. I do wish it was an instant speed, though. How cool, how wicked would this thing be if it was an instant speed? As a sorcery, still fine, though. I can give it like a 2.4. Feisty Spikeling is 1 and a Boros hybrid for a 2/1 shapeshifter with Changeling, and during your turn, this creature has first strike. Does Slivers want this? I don't know that it does, but again, that deck doesn't really have anything with first strike. I think you gotta like splash the red, and even then, that Changeling is not the cheapest mana value to play that gives all your Slivers first strike. the problem you have to the problem with putting all these guys in slivers is that the more of these you put in, the fewer slivers that actually give the abilities to your other guys. Like this guy doesn't. He's parasitic. He doesn't give any of the abilities to your other slivers. He just takes all the abilities they give you. So you want to be pretty sparing with the ones that you do play in slivers. That's why you play that one that's the enchantment or artifact exile one that I mentioned before. I don't know. I cannot remember that guy's name. I don't think you play this one in those decks. I think the first strike is okay, but I don't think it's good. And I think the slivers can deal without first strike. I think the life link from the other one gives it a new toy that it doesn't normally have access to, and that's more useful. That's more useful than this. Generally, though, I think this is an interesting card to consider. Works with lots of different Anthem style effects. I can't think of another tribe that really would make this work in Pauper, though. But maybe we'll find more tech with this later. I just think they're fun. I think most of the changelings are just fun. I will give this guy a 2. We get more Richard Kane Ferguson art with this next one. Chitinous? I think it's chitinous. Chitinous Graspling is 3 and a hybrid Simic for a 3/4 shapeshifter with changeling, and it's got reach. This also does not go in slivers. I'll tell you right now. There is a sliver that gives reach. That doesn't even really get played in the slivers decks. Not even in the sideboard, because who cares? You don't need to defend with your slivers. You want to run in with your slivers. You don't care about reach. Reach is not important to those decks. I think this is going to be a really good card in limited, just as a 4 mana 3/4 that's makes all your creature type stuff work. That's solid. But mostly this is kind of a nothing card. I'll give it a 1.5. Changeling Wayfinder is a cutie. I like the way this guy looks. 3 mana for a 1/2 shapeshifter with Changeling. And whenever this creature enters, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. I don't mind this at all. I don't think I really wanted it in my Pauper deck. I was so worried that it was going to say put it at the top of your library. If it said that, I was going to hate this card. And I think maybe just the fact that it didn't say that and it said put it in your hand, obviously it wasn't going to go on the battlefield. Are we crazy? But being able to put it in your hand is a whole lot better than putting it at the top of your library. Plus, it gets all the creature type strategies. Plus, it goes in any deck. It's colorless. I really like this frame where being colorless, but it's not an artifact, so it doesn't. It just lets the frame, like, that's cool. That's just cool stuff. Cool framing. I'm a big fan of this card. I want copies of this card. I'm gonna buy copies of this card. I don't think it goes in any of my Pauper decks. I really don't. Yeah, not basic lands. Maybe if it said any land, I could find it would go in my my Monster Tron deck. But yeah, this is just he's just a fun little guy, and I want copies of him, but I don't really want him in anything outside of a limited deck that I can think of. In fact, I'm only writing down that I want 1 copy, just so I got him. 1/2, a 3 mana 1/2 though, pretty bad. But you do get a land, and it's any land, so maybe your Elementals deck wants to play this too. But this is really good fixing. This is for the limited environment. This is about as good of fixing as you're going to get, because you didn't get the other basic land cyclers in those other colors. Furdock Core is 3 mana for a kindred artifact with Shapeshifter. So it's a changeling as well, and you can tap to add 1 mana of any color, or you can pay 4, and this artifact becomes a 4/4 artifact creature until the end of turn. It's interesting. Right? Little ramp can become a 4/4 creature that's any of the creature types. That can also be all right. 3 mana for a rock is tough. That's tough selling. You don't play the 2 mana rocks in Pauper. That's all commander stuff. And I think in Commander this will find more of a home. maybe not even really there, but more of a home than Pauper for sure. But it's interesting. I don't particularly hate it. I'll give it a I'll give it a 2.3. Maybe that's too high. Maybe two's right. Let's stick with 2. Foraging Wickermaw is 2 mana for an artifact creature Scarecrow that is a 1/3. When this creature enters, you surveil 1, and you can pay 1, and you can add 1 mana of any color. This creature becomes that color until end of turn. Activate only once each turn. Ooh, okay, that's interesting. So it's also some fixing. It's a little filtering of mana. But this thing becomes the color. So remember that 6/5 giant guy. That could help to change your color of something to be outside of maybe the colors your deck is playing, but to make that guy cheaper. And then you still get that color of mana to play with. And it's kind of cool. Kind of cool. 2 mana 1/3 as well. Is the Surveils 1 that comes into play? It does a lot of stuff. It does a lot of fun little stuff there. I don't mind it. I don't think it's really all that great in Pauper. I don't think it's really good at Pauper really at all. But I'm seeing the synergies. I like it. I like it in limited. I'm gonna keep an eye out for this guy in limited. Let's give this guy a 1.7. Next up is another Changeling, colorless Changeling card. We get Rooftop Percher, 5 mana for a 3/3 shapeshifter with Changing and Flying. And when this creature enters, you exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards and you gain 3 life. I think he really would need Flash. And even then, it'd be a tough sell in Pauper. 5 mana here. I mean, I'm thinking about like Tron decks that don't necessarily have a lot of good graveyard hate, but I mean, you can play Relic of Progenitus in any deck, right? So yeah, you don't really need this guy. He's cute. Again, I like the frame treatment here. 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer though is tough. In original Lorwyn, there was a 3 mana Changeling with Flying that was a 2/2, and that really wasn't all that playable either. Avian Changeling, I think is what it was called. But I think I'd take that over this guy. Like, sure, you gain the life, you get to exile a couple cards from like this is maybe not the worst card to play late in the game in a limited game. You do get a lot of good value off it for lots of different reasons. But in Pauper, this guy's just kind of disappointing. I'll give him a 1.9. Stalactite Dagger is 2 mana for an artifact that is an equipment. When this equipment enters, you create a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and is all creature types. And it equips for 2. So you 2 mana for a 1/1 of any/all creature types. That's not bad. And then this doesn't attach to it, though. So it is just the 1/1, but it also gives you the ability to give 1/1 and all creature types to a different creature. Okay. I really would have preferred it to attach to this guy first. If it attached to the token, in the same way that we've had like Job Select or from Rearden or those kinds of things. If it did that, and then once the creature died, then you could still get this effect on something else, I'd be a little bit more interested in it. But still, like, this is maybe an interesting blink target if you have some kind of anthem for a creature type or a niche creature type kind of thing. This is interesting for it. I don't think it's necessarily all that great for it. It's fun. It's fun though. I do like messing around with creature types in commander decks specifically. I'll give this thing a 1.5. We should only have 5 more cards to go, and it is Plains. It is Island. It is Swamp. It is Mountain. It is Forest. And an Evolving Wilds. Yay! All of these cards have been in Pauper basically forever. Some forever. Obviously, basic lands are incredible, and Evolving Wilds is fine. It doesn't really see play anymore because there's too many other good land sacrifice things, but Evolving Wilds is always going to be nice in the limited environment as well, just to make sure you get even more of that fixing and it does a halfway decent job there. That is it, friends. I'm scared to look at the time. 2.5 hours. Wow. Okay. Yep. that's probably about what it was going to be anyway. But I like Lorwyn a lot. I like thinking about this set. Again, I don't think there's really all that much for the Pauper format, which just kind of makes this 2.5 hours moot, doesn't it? But there are a handful of cards that Vivid Unraveling, which is kind of a counterspell variant. I think that's interesting. Anti-Sentence, which is the either make your opponent discard a card or do -2/-2 to an opponent. Or to an opponent's creature. I think that's all right. That Barbed Bloodletter, I think that Wither equipment is pretty good. I'm pretty excited about that one. Reckless Ransacking. God, do I even remember what some of these cards are? Let's just take a quick look back at that. Reckless Ransacking. Oh, right, the +3/+2 and the treasure token. Yeah, that's pretty good. And the Prideful Feastling was the last real one, which was the lifelink 2/3 2 in Orzhov. That's all right too. And you know what? That Tree Folk too. That white Tree Folk with Convoke and Vigilance 5/6. I think that's all right. We'll see if any of those get play. This is going to be a really fun limited environment. I cannot wait to go to pre-release and play with that stuff and just see these cards and be in this world again. This is Lorwyn means a lot to me. Maybe not as much as something like Kamigawa or Time Spiral or Mirrodin, but Lorwyn is up there. Lorwyn is definitely up there for me. Thanks for joining me on this. This obviously took way too long, but if you want to see shorter videos from me, good news, I've got a billion of them. Go see any of my rating 10 Pauper cards videos. I put them out one every weekday, so Monday through Friday. Go check those out. And then I'm putting together kind of some deck tech stuff, and similar to the video you just saw, if they ever get to see some new if there are new Magic cards and they are common, I will take a look at them on this channel. that is the common knowledge guarantee. Anyway, I will get out of here. Hope you guys enjoy Lorwyn Eclipsed, and I will catch you for the next one. See ya.